Welcome back to Inside Politics. Our guest today is Nashville Congressman Jim Cooper. Congressman, the Republicans had a major embarrassing political defeat when they said their first priority was going to be repeal and replace Obamacare, and they couldn't get a bill passed through the House, not because of Democratic opposition, but because they couldn't get enough Republican votes. Marsha Blackburn, one of your colleagues in the Tennessee delegation, was in your seat last week on this show, and she basically said by the time Congress comes back, they're going to have a workable, passable bill to present in the House. Now, there's a lot of conflicting information about that. What do you hear about what's happening on health? Is Obamacare likely to be the law of the land for some time to come, or are the Republicans going to come together with a plan they can pass?
Republicans don't want to admit it because it's embarrassing, but I think Obamacare will be more or less the law of the land for the foreseeable future. They were unable to get votes of their own party for a substitute. It really wasn't a very good substitute. Even if it had passed the House, it wasn't going anywhere in the Senate, and they all knew that, so they didn't want to walk the plank for something that wasn't going to survive. But the more acute embarrassment is that their plan wasn't very good. It was going to cost 24 million Americans their coverage. Hundreds of thousands of Tennesseans would have been hurt. Like, who could be for a bill like that? Most people will tell you they're 7 or 8 years late even trying to come up with a real substitute. They should have had one before Obamacare was passed, but they didn't, and they've had 7 years since. They voted to repeal it 62 times, but never bothered to come up with a substitute. So it's a real problem of governance for the party, and it's like trying to put a double bed sheet on a king-size bed. You pull it over one way to please the Freedom Caucus, then all the moderates are going to get left out. You pull it for the moderates, then the Freedom Caucus is going to get left out. They're unable to govern as a coherent majority.
Congress as an institution has had trouble governing the last several years, and one example of that seems to be about ready to come up again. The country is facing a situation where the Congress is going to be asked probably to increase the debt level again and to come up with a budget for the rest of the fiscal year, which would be from roughly the end of this month through the end of September. President Trump is already talking about withholding some of the subsidies for Obamacare from the budget as a way of bringing, he says, Democrats to the table. Is that going to work? Is that going to cause negotiations, or is it going to shut down the government?
Well, the best solution to this is my old plan that was law 3 or 4 years ago: no budget, no pay. Congress doesn't get paid unless it does its work on time. I wish the president would propose that. He is threatening withholding health care subsidies, but he's going to hold the American people hostage because of Congress's mistake. Don't punish the American people because Congress is screwing up. What really should happen is we've got to keep the government open and functioning. No business enterprise ever shuts itself down without a darn good reason. We can't shut down the U.S. government. We've got to get the debt in control, but congressmen have to acknowledge their responsibility. In January this year, I didn't vote for it, but tons of Republicans and Democrats did, voted to increase the national debt by $9.5 trillion over the next 10 years. They don't want to acknowledge that vote. So the debt ceiling vote we will soon have just ratifies what they already voted for. They should never have voted for it originally, but they get away with a lot of this stuff because sometimes the media isn't looking like it should be.
Congressman, in terms of no pay for Congress if they don't pass a budget, most members of Congress are so financially well off. Would it really matter to them if they lost their pay? I mean, so what? It's usually not a big part of their income.
We had a test 3 or 4 years ago. My bill wasn't popular with my colleagues, but the Republicans were looking for something popular. John Boehner, then Speaker, picked it up. It passed both the House and the Senate. Obama signed it into law, and it worked that year. This House and the Senate passed a budget. Curious thing about money is rich people like money even more than poor people do. That's why they have so much of it. And also, this bill automatically hires for free the most powerful lobbyists in the world to get the budget done on time. Spouses and pillow talk, they make sure it happens. And guess what? It happened when it passed 3 or 4 years ago.
Congressman, the Democratic base is fired up like I think nobody has seen for some time. Does that make it tougher for you, though, in Congress? If you did want to work with President Trump on something, you'd have to convince an awful lot of people that was a good idea, and they might not be convincible, even if it was a good idea.
I'm glad to see the activism of all types because our democracy works best when people are knowledgeable and involved. We all know that President Trump agrees with Democrats on a couple of key issues, like infrastructure and on holding down pharmaceutical prices. I hope he will keep those promises, because he was not a regular Republican presidential candidate in many ways, but on these two issues, he agreed far more with the Democrats than he did with the Republicans. So we need to hold him to those promises.
Democrats don't have majorities in either house. What is their strategy other than to wait for the Republicans to either screw up or divide themselves, as they've done so far so often during the thing? That's not much of a long-term strategy to be successful in Washington.
Well, Democrats have a lot of organizing to do. I think this last 100 days, though, of the Trump presidency has done more to educate Democrats than anything in recent history. I think you're going to see a much more balanced and competitive system, because that's what everybody needs. Voters need choices, and they will always pick the better of the two choices. So let's give them a real choice so that they have an alternative.
Senator Elizabeth Warren was here to raise money a few weeks ago. You were at that particular fundraiser. Vice Presidential nominee Kane was also coming soon. Are those people that you're looking at for possibly your support for president in 2020?
Well, as Nashville gets to be a more popular and prosperous city, more and more candidates are coming to visit. I try to attend all the events, because you don't know who's going to be a candidate a few years from now, but we need to develop that talent.
Congressman, thank you so much for being with us. Good luck in Washington. We'll have you back again later in the year.
Appreciate it. Thank you, sir.
And thank you for joining us this week on Inside Politics. Hope you'll be back here again for a future show. If you can't get into politics in the meantime, go to the NewsChannel 5 website. You'll find my Capitol View commentary there. There's new commentary posted every Friday afternoon. Enjoy the rest of your weekend, and we'll see you back here next time. Goodbye.